Hi there, and welcome to Hearthside. My name is Michelle. I am the author on this blog, just creating some accessible copies for things. I'm almost caught up again. I don't think I'm going to quite get caught up today. I will try to get caught up this week while I have some quiet time, and then I'm going to write more blog entries and not be caught up again. So, yeah, just be patient. Accessible copies are always coming. But yeah, let's jump in here so that I don't run out of time for this one. So, re-envisioning modern land-taking rituals in a post-colonial world. Now, I've talked a little bit about land-taking in a previous blog entry, but I've been thinking about it more and more recently, and whether it's relevant in modern times, but also in Canada, if it's the right thing to do from a post-colonial perspective. So it's just sort of been nagging me that the idea of using that word, land taking, in Canada could be problematic and seen poorly by Indigenous people because of the country's histories with colonization, about taking land, and the post-colonial sense where the mantra is land back. So land taking, it's just like the wording is problematic, but also, is this a ritual that we need in modern times? Does it have the same meaning as it did historically for people in Europe, in Iceland? Yeah, so I'm a supporter of land back. I feel land taking isn't quite describing the ritual that is occurring, and it's maybe like a bad way to name it. Another word that I have seen used for it is circumambulation. But I don't know if that's the right fit either. We might just need to come up with something new, or just be very careful in defining it so that it's not confusing, if we want to continue with it at all. So why would we not want to continue with it at all? I will get to that eventually. Right now, I want to talk basically about the purpose of this ritual, just sort of lay the groundwork. So, some sources say that land-taking rituals are to hallow the land or make it sacred, which, if you're building a Hoff or a Vey, that makes sense. But land-taking was done to create homesteads as well. And it's basically the creation of the Enclosure. Now, this isn't the same type of enclosure that I was talking about for the Enclosure movement when I was doing my Forest Commons series. This is a smaller scale enclosure that was basically the land that was needed by a family for the purpose of subsistence. So the land was used for raising crops and for raising animals needed to provide for the family through the winter. It also had a physical boundary in many cases, such as a fence, or like at least markers at the corner to recognize what property it was. The inner part of the enclosure often would have a hedge or something, but there would be like land quite often outside of that for raising animals and having the food to sustain animals and stuff, whereas the inner enclosure would be more like the food to sustain the household. And it was also to keep people from attacking the household, make it a little bit more difficult for people to come in and harm the family that was living there. So for that reason, there were boundaries in many cases around these pieces of property. But the ritual itself, it's not about taking the land. It's more about stewardship of the land, from what I understand of it. Like, ultimately, it's a pledge to the spirits of the land that you will take stewardship of that place for, historically it would have been for future generations, as many people from the same family would live on that piece of land for a long time. And this was done by using circumambulation, which means to walk around the border of the piece of land. So there's many different ways that this can be done to create a perimeter. My previous post on land taking described them in more detail, so I don't want to really get into it a lot here, because this is more about whether this is valuable. So perhaps the word taking means taking stewardship of, rather than taking the land as mine, right? Or perhaps it refers to a common form of this ritual in which physically a bit of earth was taken from each corner of the property, then brought and buried under the front step of the home, which signified the land borders and their protection by those who lived there. So that could be another meaning of why we use taking. Taking stewardship and caring for the land makes sense in the modern world, although depending on circumstances, we don't rely so much on our property for sustenance anymore. Many of us buy most of what we need from the store and often don't work from home, although over COVID, of course, that has changed a bit. Still, many of us do have at least a garden that helps provide some food for the families over the summer and perhaps over the winter too, if you're good at preserving it. And some of us are also actually still farmers and help to provide sustenance to a broader community using the land that we call home. So, what land stewardship looks like between historical heathen times and now has changed quite a bit. And if our needs have changed and our modern perceptions have changed, then at the very least what we need to do is re-envision land-taking rituals to match the time and place which we inhabit. So how can we modernize this ritual so that it fits the post-colonial nature of our relationships with the land here in Canada and, like, by extension, other places with colonial histories? First of all, we need to set our intent. And in this case, our intent is to take stewardship of a piece of land. So historically, like I said, it would be indefinitely or for multiple generations living and caring for the same land. In modern times, though, we often are much more mobile, so the land won't be cared for by multiple generations, and we need to think about what that's going to look like. We might even move within our own lifetime, and for this reason it's worth setting parameters for how long you're taking stewardship of this land. So you might say you're taking stewardship of the land until such time as you release stewardship back to the spirits of place. In which case, perhaps there is a need for a new modern ritual of land giving or land return or land release, however you want to phrase it. A new ritual that we would have to create for ourselves and envision what that would look like. You may also want to put a clause in it that you and any other family members who are present at the time of the land taking ritual, that you relinquish stewardship in the event of the last of you dying. Because you can't guarantee that future generations will keep up the stewardship or know to return the stewardship using some sort of ritual. And you may also want to incrementally take stewardship of your land because you can't care for all your property at once. So historically what would happen was they would build the boundary first, and then they would build the house in the middle. But that's not what's happening in modern times, because usually there's already a house on the property that you move to. So oftentimes in modern times, you're first taking stewardship of the house, and then maybe the next year you're taking stewardship of the enclosed garden area, and then if you have a larger property than that, a future year you're taking stewardship of a larger chunk of land that you agree to take care of. And you might even have wild land that still belongs to the wild vitir that's outside the borders of what you're agreeing to take stewardship for, if you want that land to remain with the land vitir. So yeah, it's different in that sense than it was historically, because you're moving outward instead of moving inward. So what would this modern ritual look like? There's a bunch of elements. First is land acknowledgement. What land are you living on, and who lived here historically? I'm talking about humans and other than humans. And how will you acknowledge this in your own ritual, and choose elements mindfully with that knowledge? If possible, learn about the cultures of the indigenous people who lived on this land before you, and what sentiments they would have about this land and its stewardship, and help to inform your own choices about what you do on this land. The next element is the circumambulation. So you will walk around the perimeter of the land that you wish to take stewardship for. But it's important to recognize that you don't own the land, but rather you are its steward. Like, obviously, ownership within the law is different from ownership in the sense of this ritual. So, historically, circumambulation often started in the east with the rising sun, and it would move sunwise, which would be clockwise. So you may feel that's important to incorporate within your own ritual, and there's different ways that you can do that. See my other post for that. Third element, land spirits. So when you reach each corner of your property, you may want to gift something to the land spirits while stating your intent. Make sure that you let them know that you're taking stewardship of the land and for how long, and you may ask them, if you wish, to share the land with you if they would be friendly. But not all spirits will want to be friendly with people, so ultimately that's up to your discretion. Whatever you're offering to them, it's important to think about whether that is something that's going to harm the environment. You want to pick something that would maybe be a traditional gift to these spirits, or something that at least can go back to the land safely. Fourth element is symbolism. So this is the part of the ritual where you might concretely symbolize your borders of your property in some way. So it could be taking the soil from the corner's home, like I stated previously. It could, however, be something done as part of the ritual as well, putting stakes in the corners of the property, warding the property or creating a physical boundary of some sort, whether it's a fence or something, using fire or torches. Again, my previous post had a lot more of those details. But yeah, some sort of symbolism of the boundary of your property, basically. And the last thing is hallowing. So you may want to bless the land in the name of a god or gods, Or you may just want to give a larger gift to the land spirits from a central location near to your home. So, for example, if you're using the dirt where you're burying something under your doorstep, you might bury something under the doorstep there, or leave something on the doorstep, birdseed or something that could be an offering to the land spirits, or leave some sort of offering for a god or goddess of your choice. Or you might also ask the ancestors to bless the land. So while this isn't a hof or a vey, you are creating an enclosure of sorts, and so you're setting this land apart in some way from the land outside. And that's just like an important element of it too, is bringing it all to the center and making it a cohesive whole. So those are just some ideas to get you thinking. Obviously, each person, it's going to look different. And this is all I've got time for, so my last entry that I'm getting to will be later, and I will upload these later today, hopefully, when I get back from my parade. And I will see you guys then. Bye.